Over the last few years, a phrase has started appearing more and more in political and cultural conversations: Christian nationalism. Some people see it as a threat to democracy. Others see it as a way to restore the moral foundations of the country. But what exactly does the term mean? Is it simply patriotism mixed with Christianity? Is it a call for a religious government? Or is it something else entirely? In this video, I want to slow down and examine the idea carefully. We'll look at three different ways people use the term Christian nationalism, and we'll consider what each of them would look like in practice. Then we'll ask an important question: should the United States adopt any form of it? Before we define the tiers, we should ask why this conversation is happening at all. Many people feel that Western culture has moved further and further away from the moral framework that once shaped it. For centuries, Christian ideas about justice, human dignity, forgiveness, and personal responsibility deeply influenced Western law and culture. The idea that every person has value because they are made in the image of God. The belief that power should be limited because humans are morally flawed. The expectation that leaders should act with integrity and humility. These ideas didn't come from nowhere. They were shaped by a Christian worldview. Today, however, many people believe that religion should be completely removed from public life. Faith, they argue, should stay private. But others push back against that idea. They ask, if moral ideas shaped our nation in the past, why should faith suddenly be treated as something that must be hidden? That tension is where the debate over Christian nationalism begins. The strongest version of Christian nationalism would be what we might call Tier 3. This is the idea that a nation should officially become a Christian state. In this system, Christianity would not only influence culture, it would control the government itself. Church and state would essentially merge. Laws would be explicitly based on Christian doctrine, and the government might even require citizens to follow certain religious practices. History gives us many examples of what this kind of system can look like. In medieval Europe, governments sometimes enforced religious belief through law. Dissenting groups could be punished or even persecuted. In the modern world, we see similar patterns in some theocracies where religion and government are fully combined. While the intention may be to create a moral society, the result often becomes coercion. People are forced into outward conformity rather than genuine belief. And this creates a serious problem. Christian faith has always emphasized voluntary belief. Jesus never forced anyone to follow him. In fact, when Pilate asked him if he was a king, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." John 18:36. That statement is important. Jesus did not come to build a political empire. He came to transform hearts. A government that forces religion risks turning faith into something mechanical and hollow. It also risks persecuting people who believe differently. And a nation like the United States has historically welcomed people of many backgrounds and beliefs. We want people to come here freely, not because they are forced to bend the knee to a particular religion. For these reasons, a fully religious state, Tier 3, would likely be both dangerous and contrary to the spirit of the gospel. The second form of Christian nationalism is more subtle. We can call this Tier 2. In this version, the government does not enforce religion directly, but Christianity becomes closely tied to a political party or national identity. Faith begins to function less like a spiritual commitment and more like a cultural badge. You are on the Christian side, politically. But when religion becomes tightly attached to political power, something strange happens. Christianity starts to look like just another political movement. Instead of being known for humility, service, and love, it becomes associated with elections, political battles, and ideological fights. This can create resentment and division. People who disagree politically may begin to reject Christianity altogether because they see it as merely a political tribe. The Apostle Paul warned against allowing our identity to be defined by worldly divisions. He wrote, "Our citizenship is in heaven." Philippians 3:20. Paul reminded believers that their ultimate allegiance was not to earthly kingdoms but to God. If Christianity becomes too closely tied to political power, it risks losing its spiritual credibility. And ironically, it may cause more hostility toward the very faith it seeks to promote. The third and weakest form of Christian nationalism is what we might call Tier 1. This is not about forcing Christianity through law or merging church and state. Instead, it recognizes that Christian moral ideas helped shape the foundations of the country and should still have a voice in public life. Tier 1 simply says that religious beliefs should not be pushed out of the public square. Christians should be free to live out their faith openly. They should be able to speak about moral issues without being told that their beliefs must stay private. And leaders should be encouraged to pursue virtues that Christianity has long promoted. Things like honesty, humility, justice, and compassion. This approach is closer to what many believe the American founders intended. They did not establish a national church, but they also did not try to erase religion from public life. Instead, they assumed that moral and religious values would play an important role in shaping society. The farther a nation moves away from moral foundations, the more confusion tends to grow. We see this in many areas of modern culture. Younger generations often feel uncertain about identity, purpose, and meaning. Older generations sometimes feel frustrated and disoriented by rapid cultural changes. Many people are searching for something stable. And historically, moral frameworks grounded in faith have provided that stability. The teachings of Jesus were never merely political. They addressed the deepest parts of human life. When Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, he answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." Matthew 22:37-39. Those two ideas may sound simple, but they are incredibly powerful. If people truly loved God above everything else, it would shape how they live. And if people truly loved their neighbors as themselves, it would shape how they treat others. Think about what kind of society that would create. A society where people value honesty, where people take responsibility for their actions, where families are stable, where compassion and forgiveness are encouraged instead of revenge and bitterness. These are not just religious ideas. They are moral foundations that help societies function. Jesus also warned that moral decay often begins in the human heart. In the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not murder.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." Matthew 5:21-22. In other words, Jesus was teaching that the real problem is not just outward behavior, but inward character. A healthy society cannot be built only on laws. Laws can restrain behavior, but they cannot transform the human heart. That is why Christianity has historically focused not only on rules, but on personal transformation. The Apostle Paul described this idea clearly when he wrote, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Romans 12:2. When people adopt moral values that encourage humility, self-control, and responsibility, society becomes more stable. But when moral standards disappear entirely, confusion often replaces them. This is why many people believe that the moral teachings of Jesus should still have a voice in the public conversation. Not as a tool of government control, but as a guiding influence for individuals and communities. Because ultimately, laws can only go so far. What shapes a nation most deeply is the character of its people. And the teachings of Jesus have influenced that character for centuries.